is really just sort of a background jog through the state of gas, particularly in Victoria. The reason that I've taken this approach is because I'm at the moment immersed in an alternative roadmap document. I don't know if everybody here is aware, but the Victorian government has been for some time drafting a Victorian gas substitution roadmap, and we've expected that to land before Christmas last year. Now we're hearing that it's probably not going to be released until after the election, which suggests to me that they don't really have a great deal of confidence in what's in it. They don't think it's going to be a vote winner. So at Friends of the Earth, we've been drafting our own roadmap. So a lot of the stuff that I'm drawing on here today is coming from that document. It's a very, very quick sprint through. If there is sufficient interest in the group and you'd like to have me come back and actually explain some of the more technical stuff around the gas market and around export interests and the way the gas market operates in Australia, I'm more than happy to come and provide that more detailed information. I would attempt to talk about it off the top of my head, but it is so complex. And in fact, I was sitting in a meeting on Wednesday, the number of people who are energy economists and experts, and they were all saying, yes, it's really complex. So if they say it's really complex and they're, you know, energy engineers and economists, then there's no way I'm going to start talking about it off the top of my head, not make an idiot of myself. Absolutely. So I'm going to share screen now and just jog through this PowerPoint. And don't be afraid to rein me in if it feels like it's getting to time, okay? Because I can back. Okay, so another thing that I'm really happy to do is send through links. Come on, little computer, you can do it. Okie dokie. I think we're cooking with, well, gas as it is. So cooking without gas, now we're cooking with induction. Okay, great. So this really is, like I said, just a quick scoot through the how and the why of gas and the importance of a just transition. I was going to show this video, and I would like to thank David Rothwell for sending this through. However, I'm pretty aware that unless the Zoom has been set up to play video, that it's going to go like an absolute dog's breakfast. So I'm really happy to share this link around. Basically, this is Tim Forsey in 2017 being taken up to Queensland by the 730 report and looking at the gas fields, the fracking fields around Chinchilla, Queensland. He's there with a thermal imaging camera. And with that camera, he is able to demonstrate the methane that is being emitted at every point of production and adjacent to the gas wells. He makes the point, and he's absolutely correct, that you can drill down and you can hydraulically fracture and you can know that a certain amount of gas is going to come up the gas well, but you can't be sure that that's the only place where the gas is going to escape. And fugitive emissions are one of the great problems that we have with the gas industry. So this is a fantastic little video, and it's really great for us to look at from Victoria, where we can feel a little bit smug because this is the only place in the world that has a constitutional ban on fracking. And lesser known, we also have implicit in that ban a ban on acid well stimulation, which is the dropping of hydrochloric and hydrofluoric acid down a gas well to dissolve the rock and release gas. It's not okay. And as an 11th hour push between myself with my friends, with my Lock the Gate hat on, Cam Walker from Friends of the Earth and Tim Baxter from Climate Council, we were able to pull some strings in 48 hours and have acidisation included in that constitutional ban. So quite happy with that, because we don't want any of that happening in Victoria. Prior to that, the government was really happy to greenlight that activity. So that was a bit of a concern. Even so, we do still have a gas problem in Victoria. We use over a third of the gas used on the East Coast market. So much of that is in our homes. This is a byproduct of us having the gas fields offshore that we thought were going to last forever. And at the time, it seemed like a cleaner option than coal, brown coal, and because we have some of the dirtiest coal in the world in Australia or in Victoria. But you can see that the overwhelming majority of the amount of gas that we use is in residential and small commercial, and of that about 70% is in space heating. So this room that we're in right now, I'm prepared to bet you anything, is heated by gas. And this is true all across Victoria. Not just by quantity of gas, but also the number of connections, overwhelmingly residential. The good news about this is that these are some of the easiest places for us to decarbonise and for us to get gas out of housing, to turn off gas connections. I would just like to point out before moving on to the next slide, if you can see down the bottom, losses, 7.7 petajoules of gas per year. That's nearly 4% of the gas that we use in Victoria is escaping. And when I say escaping, it's escaping between production and just behind the meter. So we don't know how much is escaping at point of production. And if we've been able to show you the video of Tim Forsey, you'd see an enormous amount. I mean, and we have no idea because no one's really monitoring it. But then also behind the meter in our homes with small leakages, somebody accidentally leaving the oven on. I mean, you know, all of these incidental things, they all add up. So we don't really know how much gas is leaking, is lost. And so when we talk about the greenhouse gas emissions from methane, we actually don't know in real terms. And when we consider that gas is up to 85 times, some people say 80 times, it depends on who you ask, but you know, some people say 87. So I'm going to sit with 85 times more climate polluting over a 20-year period than carbon dioxide. It does matter. Every 0.1% or every joule of gas that's lost has an enormous climate impact. And as Jenny pointed out quite correctly, the International Energy Agency has said that we can't afford to open up a single new coal and gas field. And they've also said, and the IPCC has told us that we have until 2030 to reduce emissions by 75%. This is a critical time. This is the critical climate decade, so we can't be messing around. Gas is also incredibly polluting. I'll go into this in more detail in a minute, so I'll just jog through these. Incredibly polluting from point of production right through to end use. It has a series of human health ramifications when we burn gas in our homes. And of course, the economics of gas just don't stack up. And this is in evidence with the amount of money that the federal government has had to throw at the gas industry in order for it to stay afloat. I'm going to speak about the economics in very simplistic terms because we spend a whole hour on that and just really kind of, you know, get lost in the weeds there, but let's not. So Jenny actually mentioned a lot of this in your introduction, so I will again just skip through this really quickly. But let's just go to the fact that Victoria cannot meet its commitment to halve the state's emissions this decade without substantially cutting our gas production and use. And the 7.7 petajoule per annum figure of 3.6% is an absolutely conservative estimate of the amount of gas that we are losing untracked in Victoria alone. In terms of pollution, and this is something that we don't really kind of take into consideration, but gas exploration and production is inherently polluting. It's the sound pollution associated with seismic testing has an incredible effect on cetaceans, whales particularly, that rely on sonar for navigation. They rely on sonar for social communication, which is critical to catch their food, and it deafens them. And I've heard it said that a deaf whale is a dead whale. I've been in meetings recently with Gunditjmara women who have the whale dreaming, and they assure me that the impact of seismic testing on the whales that come to breed around the Warrnambool beaches is just unacceptable, and they're doing everything they can to stop any further seismic testing going ahead. So seismic testing takes place when we want to see where gas is offshore. Yes?
We're having difficulty on Zoom seeing the slides.
Oh, can you not see the slides?
No.
You can't see the slides.
No.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say about that. Let me just
No, we can see the slide, but it's not progressing as you're progressing through the slides. We are fixated on the title slide.
Oh, that thing again. I've seen that happen before. Hang on. I was in a presentation where
Oh, good.
are we okay now?
Yes. We're
Are you
scrolling through
looking at one
now.
that says human health or pollution?
We've got pollution on at the moment.
Cracking. Okay. That's great. I'll okay. I think I know how to go with this now. I've just been pressing the forward button on the computer. Thank you so much for letting me know. Basically there was no pretty pictures. I just talked through stuff. So, you know, it's good that you got me before we got to the pretty pictures. When I say pretty, anyway, let's move on. As well as that, production leaks methane and other chemicals as well into the surrounding atmosphere. And gas processing isn't any better. So soil toxicity around processing sites is very difficult to remediate. You know, we saw this in the old town gas sites. A block in North Fitzroy had to be entirely dug up several meters down because it had been a town gas processing site. And the combination of heavy metal and other pollutants had embedded in the soil so deeply that there was no remediating it. You just dig it up, and I don't even know where they put that soil, which is an interesting question in itself. I do know that the housing development at the old gasworks in North Melbourne, people aren't allowed to garden into the soil. I do know that the old AGL site on Nepean Highway in Moorabbin, if you've seen it, it was decommissioned in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And it is still just a bare patch of earth with nothing but a chimney sticking out of it, not even a sports field on it, which should give you some idea of the inherent toxicity. In addition to that, farmland around processing sites have been polluted with PFAs. I'm going to polyfluoroacryls. Oh God, Amos is going to kill me for not remembering that. But anyway, PFAs, really deadly. They're terrible. And they're in almost every living thing. So they're a highly persistent organic pollutant. And they've already jeopardised beef exports. We've had some farmers from around the Gippsland region who have sent their exports over to Japan only to have them returned because they have been in breach of legal obligations to where they've committed that they're selling a clean product. And unbeknownst to them, the Longford gas plant just next door has made their product highly toxic.
Where do the heavy metals come from?
Oh, from town gas.
Oh.
Yeah, it was because it's coal, but it's not just coal. There's a combination of different chemicals that are inherent in gas. And you don't know, sometimes it's radioactive materials are embedded in gas. The fine and heavy particulate matter. Yeah. The impacts on human health, and we've seen a bit of this. If anyone saw the article that was in The Age recently where Mickey Perkins had Climate Council, Tim Baxter from the Climate Council, come around to her house and test her stove. And he was saying in this meeting earlier this week that it was the most toxic, the most polluting gas stove he's ever seen. But all gas stoves are. And living with gas is like living with a heavy smoker in the household. In babies, it can lead to preterm birth, low birth weight, congenital heart and other birth defects, infant mortality. It's directly linked to a 12% increase in childhood asthma, having gas appliances in the home. Pollutants found in gas include carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, formaldehyde, and fine particulate matter. Increasing ventilation can improve, but not entirely eliminate the risks of this. And one of the things that we're seeing is that, particularly in lower income households, and this is where gas retirement becomes a serious equity issue. In lower income households, gas stoves are less likely to be upkept. I know I was a renter in a house with a gas stove, and getting the landlord to have somebody come around and service the stove, the heater at that time was nigh on impossible. And myself and my young boys would sit down in front of the heater on a cold winter's night and start to fall asleep. And it was really alarming. You could feel your body shutting down. And we were definitely, at the lower end of the income scale. So I have lived experience of this, and the stats back this up. So it's critical that when we talk about shifting off gas, that we make sure that this is fair and equitable, and that low-income households are prioritised. The economy, so we're paying cartel prices. We're paying prices that are determined by the market. The prices we pay are set by the gas industry. They're heavily invested in gas exports, and they have strong profit motives, of course, their businesses. And their prices of gas have more than doubled in the past 12 months. This has knock-on economic consequences for homes and businesses, and again, particularly lower income households. Bill shock resulting in rising costs for homes and poorer households, cutting back on energy use to the extent that their needs for living in a warm and safe environment are no longer being met. And VCOS have reported that non-payment disconnections in households leapt from 177 to 321 gas disconnections between December 2021 to January 2022. And that's the time when people are using some of the least gas. So now that it's winter, and it's a particularly bitter winter, I'll be interested to see how those statistics are now. And cost of living has gone up. We've seen the cost of fuel, and then of course the knock-on effects that has for other things that require transportation to get around. We're all feeling the pressure. That lowest income households are particularly feeling the pressure, as well as small businesses. Those that survived COVID can't be dealing with any additional costs right now. So I'm just going to talk through this in case it's not very clearly visible to everybody. And I secured permission from the fabulous Andrew Weldon today to use this cartoon. What a guy. And that it was written in 2017, that he drew this up in 2017, and that it's just as relevant today, I think really should just give us pause. The gas shortfall is not a thing. There's heaps, but it's all being sent overseas. We're absolute wallies, and here are some options that he's put forward. So we could either import from Australia, and you may laugh, but actually one of I think it was even the CEO of Santos this week, was proposing doing exactly that, talking about exporting to Australia. So we could import from Australia. However, it's not funny, because while we were able to knock down the Western Port gas terminal in Geelong around Corio Bay, there's talk of the Viva gas terminal going in. It's close to a densely populated area. It's close to a Ramsar protected wetlands. It's if something goes wrong with it, and things can go wrong with gas. We've seen the Longford gas plant explode in 1998, and it took 10 days before gas was restored. It took 52 hours for that fire to be put out. Then, if that happens so close to Geelong Grammar and a reasonably densely populated area, the consequences are going to be unacceptable. But also that floating gas terminal would be accepting fracked gas from Queensland, from the Northern Territory, particularly. And if we in Victoria are willing to say that we're not going to accept fracked gas here, why on earth would we kick that can down the road to the Northern Territory and Queensland and say that we accept that damage to happen in the food bowls and the traditional lands of those places? So it's just unacceptable. We could import from Japan, and again, looks funny. He says maybe they could evaluate a fragrance or a mascot or something to make us feel less like gills. And again, this sounds funny, but we do exactly this with wood chips. We export our wood chips to Japan, and then we buy them back as toilet paper and copy paper. So actually, it might look stupid, but Australia is pretty much that stupid. We've been known to be that dumb before. Fracking, obviously, terrible for the environment. But look, we're this far into routing the world via fossil fuels. Why stop here, he says. We could save some of it for ourselves. And in fact, this very year, we did create a gas reserve policy in Australia. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. He says, apparently we signed contracts and forgot this bit because we thought there's heaps. Ugh. He says, move to electricity, change over too costly for many small businesses, also not always possible, e.g. the flamethrower industry, etc. While I don't have an enormous amount of concern about the future of the flamethrower industry in Australia, we do have smelting, we do have manufacturing, we've got canneries that are really heavily gas dependent. They're going to be hard to transition. Crematoria, what are we going to do instead of gas for crematoria? But we also have chemical industries. They produce polyethylenes, which, you know, I would argue we should be getting rid of anyway, wherever we possibly can. Plastic isn't good. But, you know, fertilizer and chemical fertilizers and explosives rely on urea and ammonia that we source from gas currently. And he says, move to renewables, hippie. And that's exactly the kind of hippie that I think we all need to be. 5 years ago, it was still, we'd still laugh at seeing hippie under that. That is something that has certainly changed in the last 5 years. So the Australian Domestic Gas Security Mechanism is in place to ensure there's sufficient supply of natural gas to meet the forecast needs of energy users within Australia. It was introduced in 2017. It says that if there is a supply shortfall in the domestic market, LNG projects may be required to limit their exports or find new gas sources. It was never going to be the first one, right? It was only ever going to be the second one. And that's what's breaking out at the moment in the West Kimberley and the Beetaloo Basin around Queensland. And that's how come we're seeing horizontal drilling in Victoria. And that's how come we're seeing a desire to expand into the Gippsland and Otway basins offshore of Victoria, amongst other projects. Currently, more than 70% of gas produced in Australia is sold for export, but wait, an additional 10% is also used to process that gas, because to process gas takes an enormous amount of energy as well. So roughly 80% of the gas produced in Australia is lost to an export market. The only way to avoid cataclysmic climate change, unacceptable pollution, associated health impacts, and manage our energy costs is to transition to a renewably powered all-electric energy system. What about jobs? Look, I mean, I could just say glibly that when the polio vaccine came out, no one was screaming, what about the iron lung industry? But that's not fair, because there are actually people who derive their incomes. This chart shows gas and oil extraction in yellow against renewable energy activities in green. This isn't a fair graph, I'll be honest, because extraction isn't the end of the story. There's also gas plumbing, appliance maintenance, infrastructure maintenance, appliance manufacture, and we need a comprehensive audit of all of the jobs that are in some way reliant on gas, in part or in whole reliant on gas, before we can be sure that a reskilling package to help these workers transition equitably is going to be appropriate and is going to meet the needs of those different workers and their communities. So certainly we want to see free retraining programs, the identification of alternative industries that are easy for a transition for these workers, and provide vocational transition support based on the individual workers' needs. And I think that that's a model that should be rolled out across all industries that are facing curtains, as the gas industry most certainly is and must be. So anyway, sometimes some good news. We can transition really easy. I know that this isn't very easy to look at. I've lifted it out of the Northmore-Borden report that was commissioned by Environment Victoria about demand side measures to help Victoria specifically get off gas. But I will just point out the most exciting things, that all we really need to do to more than halve our gas use per annum is maximise thermal and industrial efficiency. It's the cheapest thing that we can do right now, and Infrastructure Victoria will tell you this themselves. Making sure there's underfloor insulation, draft stopping, you know, people putting bubble wrap on their windows this winter. If you've looked at my efficient electric home, there's this swarm of low-income people who are all information sharing about how to just maximize the efficiency of their home, making sure that your curtains have helmets, you know, these sorts of simple measures that we can put in place to ensure that our homes are more efficient. But in some cases, it does also extend to wall insulation, and people can't always afford that. So I would like to see the Victorian Energy Upgrades Program extended and to include home efficiency measures as the first step. particularly for low-income households. Replace all ducted gas heating with split system air conditioners and heat pumps. And in some cases, some houses will be using ducted gas heating, and they will already have split system air conditioners and just not know that they can use that for heating. So please do, if you have one at home, and if you know anyone who's in that position, let them know that there's actually a cheaper and more carbon neutral, depending on where you're getting your electricity from, but you know, certainly more affordable and less gas intensive step you can take. So certainly switching all hot water to solar or heat pump systems. The 5 to 10 years, I'm sorry, I wrote this on the fly, that these measures will take can also be spent investing in research and development of new tech for the harder to shift industries. That's the flamethrowers and the crematoria and the chemical industries and such. Government has a huge part to play in delivering an equitable transition. Local government has been amazing so far, and I've been, as Jenny mentioned, doing quite a bit of work with councils in Victoria and New South Wales. It's really exciting to see how nimble they are and how keen they are to make a difference. So many councils now have declared a climate emergency, and they're looking for a way to implement policy that's going to be really meaningful and is going to deliver good economic outcomes for their constituents as well. So switching council facilities to renewable electric is already happening. We've already seen some fantastic municipal leaders on that in Victoria. Moreland, City of Yarra have really been leading the charge, but more and more councils are coming on board, and you know, further and further from the centre of Melbourne. So this is really strong. And I guess with the price of gas skyrocketing, one of the benefits of that is people are stampeding away from gas, and particularly where they can afford to do so, like local governments. This is my favourite, and this is an idea that I had a couple of years ago, and I know that I think it's 100th monkey in zeitgeist, because I know that a number of other people have thought of it too. Certainly it's already happening in the ACT, well underway. Mandating all electric buildings and refusing new gas connections in the planning scheme. At the moment in Victoria, we have a block of 35, depending on who you ask, 31 officially, but I hear 35 councils that are bringing a planning scheme amendment to mandate all electric buildings and zero carbon buildings. And out of that group of councils, 13 are explicitly stating and no gas connections, just to make it absolutely plain. We've had, in the last couple of months, we've had a number of councils in New South Wales coming on board with these measures. Most recently, Wallara Council have introduced a measure to investigate. So they're having to use softer language in New South Wales, and their planning system is a bit in flux, but they're all pushing in the same direction. And the Australian Local Governance Association annual conference has just happened this week, and there's been a lot of move around decarbonising gas and taking practical steps to reverse the climate crisis. So it's super exciting what local government can do. I would like to see councils next start to roll out microgrids at a municipal level that they own and become themselves power retailers. I think there's an enormous opportunity for some really agile, decentralised energy systems that are owned at a local government level. The state government needs to stop requiring gas connections be available in new developments, and they need to remove all mandates for gas-boosted appliances through regulation and legislation. Like currently right now, if you have a solar hot water system, you have to have it gas boosted if you have access to the gas network. It's in the plumbing regulations. There's a number of little sneaky little areas like this where gas is tied into our system at a state level, and that needs to be thrown out completely. We need to ensure that the energy upgrades programs don't subsidise replacement gas appliances, as they currently do. If your gas central heating breaks and if you need to replace it with other heating, it'll probably be replaced with another gas unit. I mean, it's just crazy in this day and age. And as I mentioned earlier, that the energy upgrades program offers thermal insulation packages to homes and businesses, support particularly lower income households to transition to battery supported solar powered electric appliances. I think this should be a means tested system. I think that it should be at zero cost to the lowest income households, And then up to a certain point, the money should run out and you should be able to cover it yourself if you're above a certain threshold. And of course, don't approve a single further gas development or infrastructure project, please, Victorian government. The federal government has been an absolute flustercluck for the last 7 years, and I think we can all agree. And fortunately, a brand new day has dawned, and we've just had a climate election that is delivered to us a really interesting new parliamentary mix. So hooray for that. However, the current Labor government has said that they will continue to open up coal mines and gas fields. Unacceptable. We are calling for some real changes. We want to see and this is when I say we, I'm talking, this is a lot of environmental not-for-profits are calling for these measures or similar to reform donations laws for federal parties, to prohibit corporate donations, to compel gas companies to pay tax in full, and to introduce a windfall tax. For instance, those gas companies that are at the moment benefiting, as you alluded to earlier, Jenny, benefiting so heavily from the war in the Ukraine and what that's doing to global gas prices. If they're seeing a windfall from that, we should be taxing that windfall. No more subsidies for fossil fuel interests at all, and in particular the gas industry, but any of them really. No more approvals for gas projects where they're under federal jurisdiction, and renationalise all energy systems. And like over a week ago, we might have thought that that was like pie in the sky stuff, but we've seen AEMO, the Australian Energy Market Operator, flex last week and take control of the market. And they've only just today released control of the market back to the electricity market, but they've shown that when they want to, they can. So we can nationalise our energy economy, and really, why would we not? Because if you look at this cute little graphic that I spent way too long on earlier, I'll talk you through it. So we've got the picture of Parliament House and the $11.6 billion in subsidies that went to the oil and gas industry in the last budget. We've got the $115 billion in sales that the gas industry alone made now that's a figure from 2020, I think. So these figures are all slightly different years, but they're comparable. They're not so dissimilar that we can't, this is, an unfair comparison. Out of those $115 billion of sales, $7.3 billion in royalties went back to the Australian government. You'll notice that there isn't an arrow that goes towards the ATO, Australian Taxation Office, because they paid zero tax last year. Any single person in this room paid more tax than all of the gas companies in Australia put together in the last year. So then we've got, of the $115 billion in sales, 94.7% of the profits of that went offshore. That's the big cross, not you, Australia, to everywhere else though, particularly Singapore, China, and a lot of the companies that own our infrastructure are government owned, Chinese government and Singaporean government owned. So in other words, we are throwing 11.6 billion Australian dollars at an industry that is providing us with a climate crisis that we are already feeling the teeth of, for no economic return, marginal economic return. And sure, there's some jobs in it, but nothing to justify the 94.7% of Australian dollars that's going offshore. And because Victoria is such a high gas user, we are disproportionately paying those bills that take that money offshore. We're paying that not just to the gas extraction companies, we're also paying that to the gas network companies. All of the Victorian gas networks are owned by foreign companies, with the exception of the large, like mega transmission pipeline, but all of the small network pipes that we have here are all owned by foreign companies. And then, not to forget, and I don't think we should, the $1.15 million that is, some would call it laundering if they weren't afraid of being sued. that comes from the subsidies from the Australian government through the gas industry and then neatly back into party coffers. It's a tidy little deal for everybody on this picture, but not Australia. Sorry, Zoom people, to step out of the view there. Do I really have to give up gas? Well, yes, of course. I love my gas stove and barbecue. Induction cooktops, I just bought a little one from IKEA the other day. Goes like a cracker. I'm never going back. I can't believe that it's taken me so long. I'm embarrassed, actually. If you still want to use gas for cooking, maybe try moving to a small burner fueled by bottled gas. It's what most of Australia, or most places that do actually, use gas, don't certainly burn it through the heating units of their houses, and they do have a bottle outside the window, and that's where they get their gas from, if you must. But try induction. You will probably find that you would never want to use anything else. And electric barbecues are coming along in leaps and bounds, so you can have your steak and eat it too. Does this mean that we have to sacrifice comfort for the planet? Like, are we all going to have to live in caves and, keep warm by burning our muesli vests? No, of course not. The biggest single difference that we can make to gas use across Victoria is switching gas-based heating to electric. So use your split system air conditioner as discussed. And definitely check out Tim Forsey's My Efficient Electric Home Facebook page if you're on Facebook, My Efficient Electric Home, if you're not already having a look at it. It's this fantastic database of information sharing and ways of maximising efficiency, and it's a celebration of all of the people who are cutting off gas. It's fantastic. Check it out. What about biogas and hydrogen? And look, I could go for an hour on that. And in fact, we have the expert, Jim Crosthwaite, that you're more of an expert than I am, mate, who could certainly do this justice. But just very quickly, biogas can be sourced, and a cleaner alternative if it's sourced from already occurring sources like sewage. But don't be chopping down forests and calling that, and burning it and calling that biogas, or mulching it and calling it biogas. Hydrogen is very expensive to produce. It's incredibly leaky and very energy intensive as well. So both of these sources should be reserved for those industries that are difficult to shift to renewable electricity only, until we come up with better alternatives. And there's innovations moving in leaps and bounds. So I'd like to see a lot more investment in R&D. Are renewables ready? Yes, they are, for most of the things that we need them to do. When the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, batteries work. I lived off grid on a solar panel in the 80s, 90s and 80s actually, with just one solar panel and 2 deep cell truck batteries. And on the North Coast, yes, there's a lot of sun, but then there's quite big long periods of time, as we have seen, where it is overcast and raining a lot, and we never ran out. So it's entirely possible. It was possible then, and the technology has certainly moved forward a pace since then. Solar panels will still charge on overcast days. It's so possible. And what about the environmental impact of renewables? And again, this is another whole hour we could go on, but just very quickly, yes, mining is a huge environmental issue, and there's already work being undertaken by groups like Publish What You Pay, and I believe that Beyond Zero Emissions are having a real look at the practices and the principles of the extractives industry for transition minerals action aid. There's a number of different orgs that are paying attention to the ethics of how transition minerals are extracted. There's no, I don't think we have time for that, so I'll just jog through. Renewables don't need to be at a large industrial scale to work. And this is one of the things that we're seeing, is that we're taking the same sort of mega industrialized approach that we've always taken to energy and installing renewables that way, chopping down trees and putting in, a paddock of solar panels. Look, if you're a grazier, if you want to put up solar panels to create shade for your livestock, go for it. And to produce energy, absolutely go for it. But we already have enough land under roofs. And Saul Griffiths has said this in his work on electrifying everything. All we need to do is put solar panels on all the roofs we have right now and install batteries in every street corner, and we're set. But one of the things that we do really need to consider right now, and in fact yesterday, but okay, now, is the end of life of renewable technology. It's about to become a really significant issue for Australia and for the world. So we need state and territory governments to step up, and we need them to start planning for this right now, start funding research and development into closed loop systems for all renewable energy tech. There's only one renewable energy recycling facility in Australia. It's in South Australia. That's not going to cut it. We're going to have a mountain of junk renewables, which is really just resources that haven't been properly deployed. So yes, that is a concern, and I don't think it should be overlooked. We asked for people to email through questions, and nobody sent any questions through, but I do feel like I have talked longer than you'd allocated time for. So I should probably just wrap it up there, but please everybody know you're very welcome to email me on Freja, that's F-R-E-J-A dot, not Y-A, it happens a lot, F-R-E-J-A dot Leonard, L-E-O-N-A-R-D at foe.org.au. Send your questions through. I'm really happy to make this PowerPoint available. Any background information as well, if you think it would be useful. And I would particularly like to thank the Humanist Society of Victoria and friends for making tonight possible, and all of you zooming in from wherever you are. We're all on Aboriginal land, and I pay my respects as well, ancestors past, present, and emerging. And every bit of work that we do at Friends of the Earth is towards supporting traditional land determination. Thanks very much, everybody. Stop sharing. Yep.
Freya, look, there are a couple of comments in the chat room. Maybe.
Oh, look at this.
Yeah. Well, there's been a range of comments people have been making, mainly about the costs involved in transferring from gas. And just a comment I might add to that, living in regional Victoria, I'm aware of the vast industry up here helping people who are on bottled gas for cooking. And when I look at that and I look at all the infrastructure and supplying that, it's going to be a major task.
It is going to be a major task, and this is one of the reasons why we're really encouraging governments to step up and be part of it, and we're asking for this to be means tested. While and that's why, you know, just the low hanging fruit, the easy to transition stuff, we need to set aside a decade to do that completely. Yeah. One of the issues that we have, look, what's happened in the ACT is that they've refused new gas connections in new housing developments. And what that's meant is the ACT government is now looking at the gas transmission network and going, well, that's junk technology. It's going to inevitably have to be retired at some point. So they're already planning for the retirement, and they're planning for the areas that can least afford to transition. They're having to have this conversation now to say that as we shut down the network, the cost of maintaining the network is borne by the users. That's us paying our bills. We pay a network charge. And if you're left on the network, if you're the last person left dangling on the network, you're paying for the entire network. So we're looking at escalating gas prices, and don't forget that, is that at the moment we're paying this kind of almost randomized pricing system, but certainly massively escalating. And we need to balance that against the costs of shifting to other appliances. But I would say that the highest priority are going to be unemployed households, are going to be social and public housing, are going to be the houses at the end of the transmission network and in the outer suburbs. They are going to need help immediately to transition, and they're going to need government support. And there are, as I say, there's already the Victorian Energy Upgrades Program. We just need to have that be reconsidered in such a way that it ensures an equitable transition for the poorest people. Does that answer your question?
Yes, my word.
I note that Keith Burrows said that he went to Harvey Norman looking for an induction cook stove, found 20 gas stoves and 2 induction stoves. Can I just say that Harvey Norman, Jerry Harvey is not a friend of the environment. He's not a friend of the climate in the first place. I would suggest instead that you go to Aldi this week is selling for, I hate being a spruiker, but they are selling induction cook plates for $50. And the one which is hilarious because I seriously just bought one from IKEA like a week and a half ago for $80. But okay, whatever, as long as it doesn't get more affordable than that. You're welcome, everyone who can now go to Aldi and get a $50 one because I bought one for $80 and suddenly, anyway, this seems to be what Aldi does to me every time. But so hunt around, see what you can find.
But IKEA also have a larger one with more.
They've got several
weight.
options. That's right.
It costs, I don't know, a few $100s.
Yeah, yeah.
$400
So
or $500.
that's right. Well, so Aldi just has the one single plate, and then IKEA has a range of different options at a range of different price points. And the other thing to consider with moving to induction is you will find yourself walking around with a magnet and sticking it to the bottom of your saucepans a lot more than you ever have before in your life, because if it's not magnetic, then it won't work on induction. So what we're doing in our house is we're hybridizing. Like my beloved little morning coffee maker is not going to work on the induction. So that is still happening on the gas, but we have cut our gas back significantly since the central heating died this winter, and we're turning it back on the gas stove, except when I make a morning coffee. So just to deal with backup renewals, we need large scale pumped hydro. That's a whole other conversation about energy storage and management. There's a number of different proposals. I've spoken to energy economists who say that large scale pumped hydro is not an answer. And that's a landscape that's constantly shifting. So I'm keen to get some updated information on that, because the last I heard about it was about a year ago. So I'm really happy to look into that and get back to you, Keith, if you like. Is that all the questions? Yes.
Can you go right to the top of the chat? Can we acknowledge what
Howard, that's right. Well, I meant to say right at the top of before even starting the presentation, Howard, thank you so much for your work with the Senate Greenhouse Effect Inquiry. I think you're right. I think it was around 1990, and it was a really, really interesting time. There was also a lot of heat and noise about anti-terrorism legislation going through. There was so there was this kind of real sort of constricting of government, and the Senate Greenhouse Effect Inquiry actually helped open up a bunch of conversations that needed to happen at a time when it looked like the Parliament wasn't opening up very much and was in fact shutting down conversations. So so good on you. That was fantastic work and really critical timing, mate. Nice one. Yeah. Buy you a coffee sometime.
Anyone in the
Could I just add that as far as pumped hydro is concerned, people should Google Andrew Blakers of ANU, who has done a lot of work on that. And I think you'd find he is much more positive about it.
There's a variety of views, and this is why I'm not able to sort of speak definitively on it, and I'm always seeking the latest information. So it really does depend on who you ask. And it's a matter of scale as well. I think we're going to need a diversity of different approaches to meet our energy needs going forward. We can't just lump all of our eggs in one or two baskets. Any questions from the room?
Hi. Hi, Freya. Now, Beach Energy. They've been pulling gas out of the Otway Basin for maybe 15 years. Okay. What stage are they at? I believe that something happened last year when the Victorian government made a new license for them or something.
That's right. So yes.
What can you fill us in about that?
I can. I can. And remiss of me not to give this more time, but earlier. So Beach Energy has a production license to do the only onshore drill in Victoria. Because we're not allowed to frack, because we're not allowed to pour acid down wells to dissolve rock and release gas that way, it gives us only one opportunity, and that is horizontal drilling from onshore to offshore. So Beach Energy now have a production license that's been approved by Willie D'Ambrosio, because it drills underneath Port Campbell National Park, and so as something that could potentially impact national parks, it requires a number of different approvals. And then the actual drilling license has been approved by Resources Minister Yala Pulford. Drilling underneath Port Campbell National Park into an area just 7 kilometres from the 12 Apostles Marine Park. And I mean, there's so many things wrong with that we're approving a single new gas development in Victoria at this time is ludicrous. The reason that's been given for that is because we've got this mythical gas shortfall, which has been debunked completely. It's also going to require a 12-kilometre pipeline to take the gas to the nearest processing station. That pipeline is going to crisscross Dairyland. We've already heard about how notoriously leaky gas is. So it's certainly, if it doesn't pollute that farmland, I'll eat my boots. And I'm wearing not very edible boots tonight. I'm bloody eat them anyway, because I'm confident I won't have to. It will pollute farmland if it goes ahead. It's going to go through a number of water courses as well, quite close to the ocean. So those water courses are on their way to the sea for all of the reasons it shouldn't be going ahead. That's one of my next things to deal with, is to see what we can do to stop that pipeline from going ahead, because if the pipeline can be stopped, then the actual production can't go ahead. They need to be able to ship the gas away from the wellhead. There's a number of concerns we have as well around the updated petroleum regs, and that they're not strong enough, and that the code of conduct appears to be the new updated code of conduct under which the gas industry currently operates appears to be opt-in. Well, I don't know why you have a code of conduct if people can choose whether or not they're going to adhere to it. But there are a number of concerns we have about that project and any further gas projects in Victoria. And it was a very good question, and thank you so much for asking, Stephen. So watch this space. We'll be making a lot more noise about that in future. Yeah.
So, anyone else in the room like to make a comment or ask a question?
Yes. Okay.
What's your name?
Rosemary.
Rosemary. Hello, I'm
Hello,
Freya.
Freya. I have a problem with split system air conditioners.
Yes.
I live in a block of flats which are badly soundproofed, and there have been various types of air conditioners in different flats over the years, and quite a lot of people have suffered terribly because of their neighbours running reverse cycle air conditioners in their flats. I had, well, I still have it going, but for a couple of years, I could not sleep at night because of boof, 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 boof,
Oh, that
boof,
sounds
boof,
like an old
coming
condition.
from next door.
Yeah.
It's a split system.
Yeah.
It's one which was set up, so it's what, 10 years ago? They've quietened it down a bit, but if there's no outside noise at night, I still hear it. If I get lots of wind and thunderstorm, I sleep like a baby, but if I don't, I still get doof, doof, doof. Now, the body corporate, the owners corporation, have banned installation of air conditioners in all flats for that building.
Oh,
Because
really?
it's not the only, because they've had other ones, you know, those standalone reverse cycle ones have really bothered people, and they've realized that it took a long time to work out what was making the noise. And a lot of people hear that and they think it's somebody playing a stereo. And so they have these complaints, and no, I'm not playing a stereo. And so they try the next flat. But when you've got several flats around you, so, you know, there has to be something alternative to subjecting people to that noise.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that, I think you've really highlighted the importance of having a nuanced system and having an assessment done in each area. And I think that the more we see people adopting renewable and energy efficient technologies, the more innovations we have, then the more options you have that are going to be appropriate for a different environment. For instance, a split system air conditioner isn't going to work in a school hall. You know, it's just going to be just like beavering away to heat a sort of small area. So, you know, we need to make sure that the technologies that we use are appropriate for space. Body corporate regulations are really difficult to negotiate, and I feel for you in that way, and I can appreciate that they've just gone with a blanket. You can't have an air conditioner because we just can't be buggered dealing with the heat and noise that goes with it. Having said that, you know, just before it died, our central heating unit used to make a hell of a lot of noise when it kicked on, and I'm only glad that our neighbours are pretty much deaf, because it was really noisy, and they would be within their rights to say that's an unacceptable, you know, like it, especially at night, every time it kicks in, it sort of makes a hell of a noise, you know, used to before it thankfully died. But
there used to be suburbs in Sydney where they had to turn off their air conditioners at 10 o'clock.
yeah, yeah.
Really? Yes.
Yeah.
And they were those ones you put in the window.
And I guess also this is another, they're horribly, those old 70s boxes. And I guess this is another really strong argument for making sure that we exhaust efficiency and thermal efficiency measures first and foremost, for affordability and for all of the reasons. You know, it's like we won't really know how much energy we need until we know how much energy we don't need, you know. So I would love to send Tim Forsey around to your place. I'd love to Tim Forsey to come around to your block of flats and to do an assessment, because that's exactly what he does, and there's people whose job that is. Jim.
Can we hold on to Jim for a second? We've got Les. Yes.
Oh, Les, you have your hand up. G'day, mate.
Hello. Rosemary, you've got me started on reverse cycle air conditioners. And thanks for a really informative talk, Freya. I got a lot out of that. On reverse cycle air conditioners, we have two, and we are very, very happy with them. Both of them are around about maybe 2 years old, and they're very quiet. And with these brands that we got, that was one of the selling points, because the manufacturers and designers try really, really hard to keep the noise level down. So they've done an excellent job. They're really quiet. What the challenge I have, and Vicky, my partner, has with the reverse cycle air conditioners is that when it gets to, we run it during the day, but when it gets to about 5 o'clock at night and the temperature really drops, we find that the reverse cycle air conditioner doesn't provide, it's hard to describe, doesn't provide that kind of deep heat that we've got gas ducted heating. And the gas ducted heating seems to heat more the air. So it's it's really hard to describe, with the reverse cycle, it feels like you've got hot air blowing at you, but it's not heating the air generally. So that's why we have to, unfortunately, turn on our gas ducted heating around about 5 o'clock. And I'm wondering whether anybody else has had that experience with reverse cycle heating compared with the gas ducted heating.
The problem with the split system and the reverse cycle things is that when you're next to them, they go, so it's just a whirring sound. But when that whirring sound gets onto the concrete slab, it turns into
Resonance. Yeah.
And so it's next door that's getting the problem, not you.
But this is also a question about the comfort level, isn't it? Yes. So.
Yeah, and again, I mean, that's, if you need to keep heating up the air and then it's cooling down, then you need to keep heating it up. That's not efficient as well. So I think it's a combination again of efficiency and then having another look at how your appliances are working in that space, Les. But it's a good question, and comfort is important. Jim has a question.
Yeah, just quickly, the last two questions would be great ones to put up on the My Efficient Electric Home if you know someone who'll help you do that. And you mentioned their energy efficiency. I've got in cooperative called Smart Energy to draft proof my daughter-in-law's house, and they're going to do a fantastic job for not that much, or $1,500 probably, and the comfort levels are going to be so much greater.
Yeah, that's almost a year's gas bill at
Yeah,
this point.
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
My question comment's really, it's a comment starting off from appearing before the environmental effects statement panel for the Geelong import terminal. One of the gas market experts commissioned by Viva was talking about gas coming from Western Australia. Now, Woodside have a deal with Viva about having capacity at the import terminal to bring gas in. And I think Scarborough, Viva imports there. I'll be interested in your comment on that, Freya.
Excuse me. Not COVID. That's really not COVID. Scarborough Woodside in the West Kimberley region is at the moment under an enormous amount of pressure. I don't know the latest greatest on that. I'm really happy to look into that. I should know because that's something that Lock the Gate has been working on. But at the moment, I've just had my head on the roadmap, and I know that there's been a few shifts and changes in the last 2 weeks. So I'm not confident that I can give you the latest information. But I was actually just skimming an article about it this afternoon. So
this gas market expert was basically saying he thinks gas will come from WA. He didn't say. Sorry, this gas market expert was saying he thought gas would come from WA. He didn't specifically mention Scarborough, but I think Woodside have got other assets there.
Yeah.
And I think I've really got the strong picture, like, you know, how there's always concerned about gas reservation now. We've got gas reservation in WA, that Woodside Viva would package it up, oh, we're reserving Australian gas for Australians.
Yeah, look, it wouldn't surprise me they're slimy. But I will look into that. Thank you, because that is something that's actually been kind of like hovering around the back of my mind. Stephen, I think this has to be the last question because it's at 5 to 9. So Stephen, last.
Yeah, looking at some of the simple charts of carbon emission around the world, for example, it looks like CO2 emission, say, doubled in the past quarter century worldwide. The same goes for gas. It seems like gas production worldwide has doubled in the last quarter century. But I can't understand that, you know, saying it's okay to export fossil fuel from Australia. If Australia seriously believes there is an alternative, why don't they just cut down all fossil fuel in the production in this country to a general zero and say to those other countries, don't come here looking for it?
Couldn't agree more. And this is one of the things that we hear in, you know, particularly from climate denialists who say, and even if it was caused by humans, Australia is such a tiny percentage of the world, but we're not, because we export gas and we export coal. And so the scope 2 and 3 emissions that are coming from Australia's own exports are, you know, the responsibility is on our doorstep. I couldn't agree more, Stephen. And one of the arguments I would make is that if Victoria can completely get off gas, and this is where my campaign is ultimately heading to, is to make that an inevitability. It's a matter of, because it's true, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and that when needs to be as soon as possible. If Victoria can get off gas, then we're signalling to our export markets, why are you buying our hugely expensive gas, guys? You could do so better. Look how we're doing. It's bloody cold down here and we're still managing, you know. So yeah, I take your point, absolutely. Thanks, Stephen.
Been an inspiring invitation to be part of change, I think. And so Steve will just say a few final words.
Well, Freya, thank you for your time. As a token of appreciation, we'd like to present you with a small token there,
Oh, hey, you don't
and,
have to
and
do
a
that.
special humanist pen.
You spelled my name correctly. Oh, fantastic. This is beautiful. I'm gonna, just because you spelled my name correctly, I'm going to cry. Thank you. That is really lovely.
So thank you everybody for being part of the evening. I'm going to say good night, invite everyone in the room to have a cup of tea or coffee or just stand around and chat. And I hope that we might see you either in person or online next month when we talk about the discrimination that is facing those who are in the sex work industry. So thank you again.